two guys talking about Sydney Sweeney. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
By the way, you know who else is a fan of vanity? Yep, Satan.
Without these major media outlets out there doing their job, the issue is really becoming a problem for democracy.
Do you know how many times Donald Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files? Welcome to Political Rehab, smart politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
Today, WAPO apocalypse, an election red alert, Epstein reveal fallout, a free speech clampdown, football on a death spiral, and another Sydney Sweeney hot mess. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
That's right. Time for the Trump dump. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. There's something Donald Trump did this week that pissed you off.
In the middle of deep economic pain for most Americans, collapsing global alliances, and a humanitarian crisis caused by his massive foreign aid cuts, Donald Trump has decided that what America really needs is a giant arch, a new White House ballroom, a Columbus statue, and a 2-year shutdown of the Kennedy Center. Seriously. We already knew that Trump is in the middle of tearing down and rebuilding the White House East Wing to add a massive ballroom. Current estimates are that will cost around $400 million. But now he's announced wanting a triumphal style Independence Arch in Washington at 250 feet tall. For comparison, the Lincoln Memorial is 99 feet tall. And by the way, this would cost roughly $100 million. That's not only shocking in itself, but think for a second about the fact that the ballroom is projected to cost 4 times more than a 250-foot tall arch. So what does that say about the freaking ballroom? On top of that, Trump announced this week that the Kennedy Center is going to be shut down for 2 years for renovations and ideological rebranding. Well, sounds peaceful. Somewhere between $200 million and $250 million on that one. Add in the National Garden of American Heroes refurbishment, which is now announced to include a new statue of Christopher Columbus, noted American hero. And the total cost is now pushing $1 billion for all of these Donald Trump vanity projects. By the way, you know who else is a fan of vanity?
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
Yep, Satan. Now, is this the biggest crisis in the country? No. And that's actually the point, because while Trump is redesigning monuments, we've seen violent crackdowns involving federal forces in American cities, tariffs pushing prices higher for consumers. Federal judges are daily issuing rulings about how they can't believe how badly the supposedly conservative administration is shredding the Constitution. And this is what the president of the United States is spending his time and our money on. Now, of course, this is not the first time that Donald Trump has overcompensated for something, but now his deep feelings of inadequacy have been mixed with the psychological complex of a rapidly aging man who has a waning grip on power, and that's leading him to act out at all of our expense. In fact, he's literally become the robot Bender from Futurama.
Be a statue of ridiculous proportion, 1 billion cubits in height, and be quick about it. Remember me.
Does it please you, my lord?
Tear it down and try again.
If there's good news here, it's the way that particular comedy cartoon parody ended.
The pharaoh suddenly died.
Yes, let's hope that the American people have the exact same reaction to this particular pharaoh.
My Trump dump this week is a bit of a Texas two-step. Now, last week, there was a special election in Texas for a vacant Senate seat where the Democrat won by 14 points. And here's why that should set off political alarm bells. Donald Trump carried the district by 17 points, and a Democrat hasn't held that seat in 45 years. That should trigger a serious autopsy inside the GOP. Hard questions, a strategy meetings, a rethink, right? Nope. Apparently, the GOP lost because of a winter storm. Here's what Congressman Pete Sessions had to say.
John, first of all, the success of a rain dance has a lot to do with timing. And what happened is there was a huge snowstorm, ice storm really, that hit North Texas and Central Texas.
Rain? Weather? Come on. Republicans have a registration advantage in the district. We should have won on numbers alone. The real problem is Democrats are turning out in historic numbers, even in awful conditions. Now, look, I know Republicans are going to lose the midterm. History and the political environment's not on our side. We are running into a 40-mile-an-hour headwind. But for the love of God, don't put your head in the sand. At least show up for the fight. Stop with stupid excuses. Where is this fight I keep hearing from MAGA? But here's the deeper problem. This isn't just policy, it's strategy. Republicans are all in on Trump. Every ad, every message, every commercial is about the leadership of Donald Trump. And when you contort yourself to defend Trump at all costs, you get moments like this.
We should have bipartisan agreement. How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles?
Stop attacking pedophiles. We can't even agree that pedophiles are bad. I don't care what the next sentence is here. You never start with, we should stop attacking pedophiles, ever. Now, there's a report in the Hill that says Republicans fear Trump backlash could cost them Senate control. And that should not be a shocking revolution. Most Americans don't like Donald Trump. And the voters who actually decide elections don't see strength. They see chaos. They don't see leadership. They see an America that doesn't look like America anymore. Republicans had hitched their future to a president who's basically the Titanic. And instead of steering away from the iceberg, they're arguing about the weather.
I love the take homes there. The party of Trump. We're for pedophiles and we're with you all the way, unless it's mildly damp outside. With that, let's get to this week's political rundown. First up, democracy dying in darkness. The Washington Post just took a meat cleaver to itself, announcing roughly 1/3 of its workforce is going to be laid off, hundreds of newsroom jobs. This is part of a broader pattern of flagship newspapers cutting back on their reporting staff and their capabilities. Matt, this raises the question of what this is going to do to the press's ability to check power in America.
The press is vital to accountability, and print media is dying. I think the real problem is what's replacing it. I mean, now we got silos that only report what you want to hear, and I think that's a major problem right now. We see on X a lot where you are the media now, you are the press now, but news is not partisan. And without these major media outlets out there doing their job of holding accountable truth to power, as everybody likes to say, the issue is really becoming a problem for democracy.
I think that the overall trend is definitely a problem. Fewer reporters means fewer watchdogs. And you see this especially in state house coverage, local coverage. There is research that shows that when local papers close, municipal borrowing costs rise by 5 to 11 basis points because there's less oversight. There's worse governance. 50 million Americans have limited or no local news access. All of this is a problem for accountability and for informing a public who is seriously apathetic and misinformed. When it comes to the Washington Post itself, I'm going to zig on this one a little bit. I think this is kind of what you get when you destroy a media brand by moving toward a libertarian, ostensibly pro-market slant opinion and journalism and away from your core brand. You lose hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I canceled my subscription to the Washington Post because they took this mealy-mouthed bullshit position on we're not going to endorse Kamala Harris because they wanted to suck up to Donald Trump. What's really amazing is that for a businessman as accomplished as Jeff Bezos with vision to see the kinds of long-term investments that will allow Amazon to thrive, they completely missed the boat with the Washington Post when it came to what it takes to compete in the modern news environment. The New York Times has moved from an ad-driven model to a subscription-first model, and they're growing 14% year-over-year growth in recent earnings reports, more than $1 billion of revenue annually from digital subscriptions, and they've basically made it a bundle thing. Most of their business is being driven by games and Wirecutter, but they're bundling it with the news business. That's become the on-ramp that keeps people paying for journalism. The Washington Post hasn't figured that out. They have a losing business strategy. They've alienated their opinion room. They've alienated their journalists, and they've alienated their subscribers. And yes, they're in a death spiral, and this is what they get.
I'm going to switch gears now to something that I actually think is even a bigger threat, and that is Trump's call this week to start to nationalize elections. We had federal agents executed an unprecedented raid on Fulton County election offices, seizing hundreds of 2020 ballots. Yeah, 2020 ballots. That's 6 years ago, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Trump urged Republicans to take over voting and not to be outdone. Steve Bannon has gone further, saying federal agents like ICE should surround the polls in the midterms. Matt, is this a sign to come of what's happening in 2026 in the midterms?
Yes. And we have seen over and over again that the people who raise the alarm, who say, hey, there's a red flag going on with Donald Trump here. He's calling his shot like an evil Babe Ruth pointing to left field. They've been called alarmists. Oh, you're going too far. Oh, you libs, you snowflakes. And time again, the most extreme version of the threat that Trump is projecting turns out to be exactly what he has in mind. Now, in this case, of course, federalizing or nationalizing elections is unconstitutional. But really, the point is to introduce the threat that people of color, that people who might be taken into custody by ICE are going to be afraid to go to polling places. That's what these fishing expeditions into state voter rolls are all about, is creating an atmosphere of intimidation and fear that depresses voter turnout in particular segments, and is sort of a Hail Mary pass to try to save Trump and his party in the midterms. And it's absolute authoritarian bullshit.
Somebody needs to tell Trump to read the Constitution. I think you're exactly right. It's not what this is all about. I mean, it is about relitigating the 2020 election. It is about trying to create confusion and distraction. At the heart of it, this is all part of the Trump playbook. It's almost like watching an aging star play his greatest hits up on stage. Stolen elections, weaponization of DOJ, immigration. And what it's meant to do is try to motivate the base, but suppress Democrat votes. Like I said in my opening, we're going to get our butt kicked this year. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And Trump's only approach is to try and intimidate and keep people from voting. And I do think there's a real chance we're going to see agents, and we're going to see federal agents at the polls. And that's just un-American.
If people want to know what a thinly disguised fig leaf of an excuse this whole like, oh, we're going to stop immigrants from voting thing is, hold on for our That's Bullshit segment later in the show. Meanwhile, we have to talk about the fallout from the new disclosures of the Epstein files, the DOJ releasing about 3.5 million pages of documents, videos, images, and emails tied to the investigation in the past week. It's the largest tranche yet, and it's intended to make public nearly all of the unclassified materials that the government holds. There have been massive mistakes in the course of this release, unredacted, inappropriately redacted, failure to redact materials that they've had to clean up. There are, of course, questions about whether they've really released everything they have, but it's led to massive fallout and embarrassment across financial, political, and media circles. Matt, what's the takeaway? And what are you hearing from the Republican side about this long-awaited release?
There's a couple things here. The first thing is, let's be clear, this is strategic. The shit show that we're seeing is strategic. It's meant to distract, even bringing the Clintons in. Again, we keep going back to our old adversaries, but we're bringing the Clintons in to testify about Epstein. And I heard Republican members say, we're going to find out what they know. That's interesting because one of the names mentioned most is Donald Trump, but we're not calling him to testify and see what he knows. So this is really about a pure distraction and overwhelm the system. So maybe you just dismiss it. Like we talked about in the media, we're living in silos. So when you're on my side of the aisle, all I hear is witch hunt. The purpose here is we're trying to kind of get out there and push this narrative that there's really nothing to see here. There's nothing to go after here, but we're still going to go after our enemies like the Clintons. Right now, it looks like Republicans are on the side of pedophiles, and that's just where people decide elections. This isn't going to work, and it doesn't matter how much Trump yells and screams. Voters see what it is, and it's alienated his base that wanted to see the release of these things up early. I think it's just a political mess that is going to continue to blow up in our face.
Fun fact, this is what my 12-year-old told me this morning. And by the way, maybe this should be a new segment for us. Fun facts from my 12-year-old. Do you know how many times Jesus is mentioned in the Bible.
How many times?
In the King James Version, it's 983 times. Do you know how many times Donald Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files?
How many?
It's more. It's a lot.
I would assume it's a
more.
lot more.
And that says something.
Yes, it does. And let's not forget that also when Caitlin Collins asked him about it, his response was, you need to smile more. You never smile. I mean, talk about a complete shit show that this thing has become. It's a mess for shit shows. We had Don Lemon arrested covering an event. Trump has threatened to sue Trevor Noah over comments he made at the Grammys. And there's quote unquote backlash over Bad Bunny performing at Super Bowl because he's made comments about ICE that MAGA doesn't like. So much so that ICE officials are going to be outside the stadium this week for the Super Bowl. What it seems to me, Matt, is that we have an all-out assault on speech that the president doesn't like, an all-out assault on enemies. It feels like this is getting dangerous. What's your take?
My take is it is an all-out assault on speech. It's an all-out assault on comedy. It's an all-out assault on parody and satire. And what's really perverse about it is that we've talked about on this show before the strong case that satire doesn't really work. It doesn't really change people's views. We did a Dose of Hope segment about the Chinese Donald Trump impersonator who's amazing. He's spot on, really funny, not really moving minds. The fact that Donald Trump is so afraid of speech and criticism and comedy and satire and parody shows what a thin-skinned, small little man he is. Yes, small little man. And he's so afraid of it. So it's more revealing about him. I think the cure, the only thing we can do in the face of this, is more speech, more satire, more parody, and just banding together to make fun of him relentlessly and until he gets even more scared.
Look, I actually think this ties into your Trump dump a lot. The Arch, the Kennedy Center, the ballroom. These are all places where he can want to put his name on it, his stamp on it, get the adulation. And the other side of that equation is people who criticize or report or tell the truth, like we just said with Caitlin Collins, asking questions. His immediate attack is, you don't smile. I've never seen you smile. Look, I've never liked Don Lemon, but he is a reporter and freedom of speech is fundamental. Going after comedy, going after jokes, it really does show the pattern here where any criticism is going to be met with force. And that's authoritarian impulses that should scare every Republican. I mean, we can always disagree with speech but we should always defend people's right to say it. And comedy is comedy. And if we can't laugh at it, then you're in the wrong business, because as Republicans, we do a lot that people should make fun of.
This reminds me of the earlier episode where Chrissy Teigen called Donald Trump, and this is not safe for work, a pussy ass bitch. And he demanded, take it down, Twitter. I can't deal with it. This model, the supermodel, she called me something mean, and it's true. I am a pussy ass bitch. I am. There is a new analysis from cultural critic Chuck Klosterman this week in his forthcoming book, suggesting that good old American mom and apple pie football is in a long-term death spiral. Klosterman argues that advertising economics could collapse the business model in the years ahead. And also, football is going to lose its organic connection to the American people as more and more parents say, no, I don't want my kids getting involved in youth football. I don't want them to have the head injuries. Matt, is football actually in a death spiral?
I kind of think it is. Look, football has struggled with everything from kneeling during the national anthem to problems with halftime performers. It's starting to feel like there are more problems off the field than on the field. And then you couple that with what you just said is as parents start to move away from the sport, as it becomes much more of just a made for TV activity, quite frankly, fans become more and more disconnected. Now, look, there are going to be places that is never going to be true. Philly, for example, I'm an Eagles season ticket holder. Like, you're never going to lose that fan base. And you're never going to lose it in New York. You're never going to
But you're not going to live forever.
That is probably.
I think the question is, once we're gone, what about the next generation?
First of all, I think I probably am going to live forever. But once we get past that, then
you
next
and John
generation
both.
probably does struggle. But it does. I think football has a real institutional problem that it hasn't figured out how to address. And they've tried to pare it down with some of the new rules, how not to hits on the quarterback. But if you're an old school fan, some of what you see as you lose that violence, the same thing that is having parents not wanting their kids be involved, make it less entertaining. And so I do think football has a problem. And I do think there are other sports that are going to continue to take that void. I do think we're going to see a bigger emergence of soccer coming through. And I'm still pushing for more and more golf.
Look, personally, I have moved from NFL viewership to soccer viewership because I find the sport more compelling. Look, the numbers do say that there is a problem. Youth participation went from 3.26 million in 2010 to 2.25 million by 2022. But I think the unknown here is, what is the revenue model? What is the advertising model? What drives the economics of ad revenue? And we've seen that shift. And live sports in the NFL continues to be the most valuable property for advertisers. Whether that will continue into the future, who really knows? Okay, on that note, we are going to move on to this week's more fun version of a deep dive, where we talk about something that is truly a hot mess.
Now, another edition of Politics Meets Pop Culture.
That's right. We are going to dive into the latest Sydney Sweeney controversy. And yes, two guys talking about Sydney Sweeney. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? There's
What
no
could
problems
go
here.
wrong? Yes, this is not problematic. No, we are not going to be gross. We want to talk about the politics of this. The controversy that blew up, a little bit of a tempest in a teapot over the past week, but that's sort of the nature of everything having to do with this particular actress, is her statement to Cosmo that she doesn't see herself as a political force, a political entity. She's not really that interested in politics, and, quote, has never been here to talk about politics. That, of course, reignited some of the backlash from online progressive influencers who argue that public neutrality is itself a political act in the era of Trump, and it reignites some of the controversy that arose this past summer over a widely mocked American Eagle jeans ad in which the tagline was, "Sydney Sweeney has great genes," which some on the online left claimed echoed racist or eugenic language, much to the bafflement of many mainstream observers like me. Matt, I really genuinely want to ask you, here's where I struggle as a kind of center-left Democrat. I'm somewhat online. I never understood the controversy. I thought it wasn't really a controversy, but I started having Republican friends in my life text me this past summer saying, "Oh, this shows how deranged the left is. This shows how crazy and out of touch they are." And I never understood, was this actually a thing? How did you perceive it? And how are you perceiving this most recent round of it as a Republican and in Republican circles that you travel in?
It's interesting. Hollywood has always been one of these places. As a Republican, we don't actually see a lot of conservatism out there. You get the flashpoints, you get Schwarzenegger, you get Stallone, you get those guys from the 80s. It just sort of always feels like that anytime there's a Republican and a celebrity, they get shut down, they get fired. So when the Sydney Sweeney thing broke, like my feeds, my social media was full of it, because you do see Republicans out there who, anytime there is a celebrity who may or may not be on our side, she's never confirmed it, but when you do feel it, you feel like you got to rush to defend it. To put it in perspective, this is several years ago, but I remember I go to a lot of GOP conventions, and there's always a Hollywood component. And I remember one of these years, and I don't remember which year now, it was probably '08, because it was Obama. And I remember it was George Clooney. It was all the A-listers that showed up to it. At the Republican, we had George Wendt, and he was there begrudgingly. And I remember I went up to shake his hand, and he did one of these. Okay. I don't
Can I
even
ask
want
you
to
about
touch a
Republican
Republican.
conventions? I picture them kind of like the Kevin Bacon scene in Animal House, Is it like dudes in robes by candlelight and you're getting paddled? Thank you, sir. May I have another? What happens at these things? Are you guys as weird as I think you are?
I'm going to say no. These are much more normal events. I mean, have our share. And I've watched a lot of Democrat conventions to know this too, but we get especially a little bit weird out there sometimes. But it just, when we sort of try to get to the celebrity side, we're always that second and third tier group out there that we just get the people who are forced to show up. And I think that's why you see this on the Sydney Sweeney's. It is for our side this week. You would have liked her to say, yes, I'm going to get involved in politics. I'm going to talk about this. Whereas on the other side, you got people like Taylor Swift. And you remember a year ago, you had Donald Trump criticizing Taylor Swift and telling her not to get involved. And it just continues to show the disconnect that we have in the power of pop culture in the conversation, but also how conservatives seem to be silenced when it comes to that side.
I just saw this as nothing. This is Republicans being so thirsty, so very thirsty for something to be here. And to our great peril and shame as Democrats, we have fucknuts on our side who themselves are thirsty for attention on social. They are trying tactically to angle in the attention economy for eyeballs and earballs. And so you get these numbnutses like Matt Bernstein, who, was part of the chorus mocking her claim to political neutrality and has 2 million followers on Instagram. And this is entirely constructed by people who are like, ooh, you have a hot Hollywood actress who are just trying to manufacture attention for themselves off of this. The jeans ad was fucking nothing. It was nothing. And oh yeah, you've got a handful of wokeists out there who are trying to make something out of it. And now you've got her saying, I don't want to wade into politics. I don't know how old she is. She's in her mid-20s. We know that career spans are really tough for women in Hollywood. It gets tougher and tougher to get meaty, meaningful roles. That sucks. It's terrible. And I'm not going to be a political lightning rod when I'm in the middle of the most important part of my career. I'm not like defending or anything. I'm just analyzing. This is probably what's going on. Shit. I mean, 25 years ago, we saw this exact same thing with Britney Spears. Mm-hmm. She was interviewed and someone asked her some question about George W. Bush. And she said, oh, I don't know. I guess we should just do whatever the president says because he's the president. It was her way of just trying to say, don't ask me this. I don't want to be in any controversy about politics. That's not what I'm here for. And you know what? If you go to your celebrities for their politics, what are you doing? You're missing the point. Like Tom Brady has shitty politics from my standpoint. That has nothing to do with his performance as a quarterback, right? So I don't care what he thinks about politics. I don't care what Sydney Sweeney thinks.
Right.
And I don't care what some online influencer who's trying to get attention thinks about some jeans ad. I didn't even know American Eagle was a jeans brand. So this is entirely manufactured, astroturf bullshit nonsense that's not really a controversy, that says more about the social media attention economy than it does about politics to me.
And you're 100% correct, because that's what this is. This is a social media attention grabbing. Let's attack her. I agree with you. If we're getting our political advice from celebrities, there's something else wrong here. But she also, and this is where I think it becomes a bigger story for Republicans, is that she can't express those views. Maybe she does support Trump. Maybe she just liked something he said or something she heard. We don't even know because she's never come out. But the fact that Republicans still feel like in Hollywood they cannot say those things, I think is why you see this. And
that is interesting.
And why it continues to grow. Why we're talking about it today is simply because Republicans see this as you didn't stand up for the president, and Democrats online, again, I don't think most Democrats really care, but Democrats online, or at least the woke left, look at this thing and say, you didn't go after the president. You didn't go after Republicans. So therefore you must be with. It's a stupid line we've drawn in the sand that we expect our celebrities to get in the middle of this stuff. Let them do their job. Let them
Right.
entertain.
Look,
It-
if I'm sick, I don't go to my local celebrity for a prescription, right? If I got sued, I'm not going to look for legal representation from George Clooney, maybe Amal Clooney. I I just don't understand why we would demand this of our actors. I
exactly.
hear your point, though. It is interesting that there's a perception and a little bit of an axe to grind from Republicans that it's easier to come out as gay now and welcomed in Hollywood than to come out as a Republican, let alone a MAGA. Now,
Right.
if you're coming out as a MAGA, you have problems in more places than just Hollywood, given everything that's going on. But again, I see your point, and I will concede that I'd like to wish away the existence of the super hyper online wokeists.
Mhm.
I would like to say, okay, this is a vanishingly small minority. And I do think it is a definitive minority of even the progressive left, but they do exist. And there's no
Exactly.
denying that they had cultural ascendance for several years there in the late 2010s and early 2020s. And that was to the detriment of the Democratic Party and to the detriment of all of us who are against Donald Trump. It's been a problem and it exists. It is a real thing. So I concede that point.
Mhm.
I still think that this is an example of tactical social media deployment of engineered controversy that is meaningless. It does reveal some underlying truths, but the issue itself is nothing.
All I know is Democrats have Taylor Swift, Republicans have Sydney Sweeney. So feels like a tie.
And you don't even know that you have her. There you go.
Until
all
she
right.
says otherwise, she's a Republican.
Joking aside, I will close out because we are two dudes talking about prominent women who are exceptionally successful at what they do. And I'll close out by saying, I don't care what Taylor Swift's politics are. I don't care what Sydney Sweeney's politics are. And I wish them much success in their career. And if they would like a right to not comment on politics, I support them in that. So with that, all right, let's get on to something that's even more sus. Our weekly, that's bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A bullshit?
Have you ever had to explain something simple to a small child and they just can't grasp it? We're in that position with the President of the United States.
President Donald Trump called on Republicans to, quote, take over the voting in at least 15 places, re-upping his unfounded claims that undocumented immigrants illegally vote for Democrats.
Okay, I'm going to go through this just one more time for reasonable, smart people who've been hearing this kind of thing and want to be able to judge for themselves. The claim that non-citizens vote in any meaningful amount or that those votes could have affected any election outcomes is completely false. Study after study of non-citizen voting has found that it's extremely rare. The most comprehensive looked at 23.5 million votes in areas with high immigrant populations and found just 30 cases of suspected non-citizen voting. That's 0.0001%. For comparison, you're 5 times more likely to be struck by lightning or to be attacked by a shark. You're more likely to die in a sharknado.
They're sharks. They're scary.
In Georgia, a 2022 audit was unable to identify a single instance of a non-citizen casting a ballot. Now, some of you might be saying, wait, I've heard that up to 27% of non-citizens are illegally registered to vote. What about that? That claim is based on a single paper from 2014 by a political scientist named Jesse Richmond. And after other researchers pointed out that he'd made some errors, he issued a correction saying, okay, maybe 1% of non-citizens are registered to vote. And when experts looked at that, they found that his data actually showed the likely percent of non-citizen voters in recent U.S. elections is pretty much zero. But setting aside facts and math for a moment, just think about this logically. It's illegal for people who are not U.S. citizens to vote. Registering to vote loses them the ability to ever become U.S. citizens. The very rare cases that happen leave a clear paper trail. Given how badly these people want to be in this country, why would they commit such an obvious crime on purpose where they're super likely to get caught and that's so extremely unlikely to work, since states regularly verify voter registration information and remove ineligible voters from voter rolls? But even though none of this makes any sense, Republicans do have an incentive to keep pushing things like the SAVE Act, which requires Americans to show even more paperwork than they're already required to in order to register. More than 21 million Americans are unable to access those additional documents. And since those American citizens are disproportionately from voting groups that are more likely to vote for Democrats, you see the motivation. The myth of non-citizen voting is a useful lie, but that doesn't mean that we have to be useful idiots. Just reject this particularly insidious piece of bullshit once and for all. So, Matt, I want to talk to you much more at some future point about voting identification, how Republicans really see this, how Democrats really see this, and whether this is something that we could actually fix in the future, because I suspect that it is. But we'll have to wait on that discussion for a future show. So in the meantime, I hope people will subscribe to this channel so that you will be there for that conversation. But in the meantime, let's close out with our regular dose of hope. For my dose of hope this week, I want to talk about faith. We've been going through a rough patch when it comes to political leaders twisting faith beyond all recognition for their own purposes. And that can be a little discouraging for many of us. It's quite amazing that faith leaders continue to support our current president, who is, without question, the most immoral person to ever occupy high office in this country, based on both his public conduct and his personal life. But an emerging chorus of prominent faith leaders have been raising their voices to criticize Trump's ICE assault, both in Minnesota and elsewhere. Pope Leo XIV has warned of the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States. Archbishop Paul Coakley, president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, has spoken of the current climate of fear and polarization. And Los Angeles Archbishop Jose H. Gomez yesterday was praying for immigrants in our country and calling on God to awaken again the conscience of Americans. I've recently been rereading Passage of Power by Robert Caro, his gripping history of how Lyndon Johnson assumed the presidency after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and how he mobilized every available political asset to force the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. One of the most important factors in that fight was the weight of faith leaders from different religions and denominations joining together to pressure Midwestern Republican senators who were nominally in favor of civil rights, but didn't have a major stake in passing the bill because they didn't have major constituencies of Black Americans. But the civil rights struggle had God on their side in the form of leaders who made it their mission to speak to these senators in stark moral terms and to mobilize their congregations. So yes, faith has been twisted and distorted and used by politicians for evil ends for a long time, and that will no doubt continue to be the case. But it's also been mobilized as a force for good and progress in this country. And we've seen people of faith join together to accomplish profound things for America, and we're beginning to see it again.
That's great. I went a little different direction. This week, the Olympics began. And for a little while, something familiar happens in America. We stop yelling at each other and we start cheering together. Red states, blue states, everything in between, all pulling for the same flag, the same athletes, the same idea that hard work still matters, sacrifice still counts, and excellence is still worth celebrating. These athletes didn't get here because of politics. They got here because they got up early, stayed late, fell down, got back up, and refused to quit. That's not a left-wing value or a right-wing value. That's an American one. Ronald Reagan, whose birthday is February 6th, used to say that America was a shining city on a hill, not because we were perfect, but because people everywhere could see what was possible here. The Olympics remind us of that. They remind us that they're still capable of unity, still capable of pride without arrogance, still capable of believing in something bigger than the next argument or the next election. For a few weeks, we remember who we are when we're at our best, not divided, not cynical, not afraid, but hopeful, determined, and cheering for one another. And honestly, America could use that reminder right now.
That's a reminder that is evergreen for Americans. And on that hopeful note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.